there, storytellers! Welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 27 of Bookoween, which also happens to be my 27th birthday. So, for today's video, I thought I would share 5 books that helped shape me as a person and a reader. Without any further ado, let's get right on into it, and I thought I'd go in chronological order because that is the order in which these books shaped me. Would also be fairly accurate to refer to these as my 5 top favorite books, because they pretty much are. Book number 1 is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I have talked about this book a lot on my channel because I love it, and it is the book that shaped me as a reader. This is the literal first chapter book I ever read, or remember reading at any rate, and I was about, I want to say 6 years old, and my mom had started reading it to me, and she would get too tired, because my mom was not a night owl, to keep going, so I would take the book from her and read to her instead, which of course is a challenge, pronouncing some of the names in here, but I did my best, and I eventually returned to it as an adult, and I've never really looked back. Reading Bilbo's journey as a young kid really helped to show me, A, that no person is too small to be important in the course of a big event. Everyone can make a difference, but also that there's a really important quality to home and creature comforts and knowing that in your heart you have somewhere you belong that you want to get back to. Even if you stray and adventure, you always have somewhere you can call your own. And I think that's really what helped solidify me as a homebody, to be perfectly honest. I think I would have always been inclined to be one, but Bilbo is certainly a homebody, even though he likes to adventure, and I get it. Next, we have the novella The Body by Stephen King. And this, I want to say, I read for the first time in middle school, right around the time I read The Outsiders, although this one I read first and stuck with me a little bit more strongly than The Outsiders, although that one could also be sort of on this list. This novella follows 4 boys around the same age I was when I was reading it for the first time, like 12, and they're going in search of a missing boy that they've heard, you know, someone has located but hasn't told the police about because they were in a stolen car. And the boys go in search of this missing boy who has passed, and they initially want to go because they think, you know, we can get credit, we'll be heroes, but it's more of a story about them sort of growing as people and growing into their adulthood. This was originally part of his novella collection Different Seasons, and it was under the Fall as the Fall from Innocence, and that is exactly what it is. It's about sort of stepping into your next phase of your life. It's a coming-of-age novella, and it's really where I learned that I prefer character-driven stories. I fell in love with the boys in this book, and I wanted to write characters that were as dynamic and compelling and nuanced as they are. Even though they're only like 12, they all have a lot going on in their lives that make them who they are, and I really appreciated getting that kind of a story, and I really appreciate the way King does it. In some of his other novels, I know people tend to actually argue that he writes too much, but I actually think he has a really concise way of phrasing things, but most especially in something like The Body, where he's really doesn't have to build a world. He's not world building. It's really a cut and dry story about boys in the 60s, 50s. I don't remember the date. It's been a while since I've read this. 1960, so I'm right. It's a simpler time, so it doesn't have that sort of layer of, you know, real life drama versus internet drama versus the overlap of real life and internet drama kind of thing. It's really about coming of age. And apart from the fact that it's where I learned I enjoy character-driven stories more than plot-driven ones, and it inspired a sort of emulative writing style, I think in novellas like this is where King really shines in terms of his concise descriptions. I know in other novels he's kind of criticized for being a little bit long-winded. I've never found that issue, but I think this is one that he manages not to be, even if you're objectively someone who thinks he's long-winded to begin with. I also happen to learn from this story that I like stories set in the 60s. It's a time period that I just appreciate reading stories about. So a bonus inspiration from this one. Next, we have Avalon High by Meg Cabot. This is a relatively modern day Arthurian retelling, and it follows our main character Ellie, who is not who people assume she is in terms of Arthurian figures. Basically, they're all reincarnations of Arthurian figures, and they're sort of playing out this battle between good and evil. Ellie is one of the first to figure out that they are reincarnations of Arthurian figures from the past. They're reborn, and she senses something is coming and she's trying to stop it. But this is one of the first, it's not the first Arthurian adaptation I've ever read. That was Song of the Sparrow, but this is the first one that really solidified my love of the characters. I think setting them in a modern, sort of easy to digest setting is what really did it for me, because you can really see the overlap. You know, it makes it easier for you to see yourself in a character when they're in a modern adaptation, but they have that sort of magic of the legends. Apart from sparking my true love for Arthurian retellings, it also occasionally sparks an interest in running. Every once in a while, I think after I read this that I'm going to become a runner, and I don't, because I don't actually like running that much, but I want to like running because this book makes it sound like it's so good. Next, we have Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. This is one I first picked up a few years ago, and I've reread it a bunch of times ever since. Something about it just really clicked for me. It was the book I needed at the time I needed it. Seeing a writer who was around my age, I was a little bit closer to Kath's age at the time I first read it, who struggles with anxiety and is part of this big fandom and gets really invested in these books and stories that she loves, and to the point of almost obsession, was something I really clicked with, especially because she struggles with very kind of classic writer's doubt of, I can take another person's characters that I love and I can show you how passionate I am about them and write a great story that's very creative and new, but I can't really do anything with it because it's not mine, because Kath is, of course, a fan fiction writer, hence Fangirl. She struggles with, I couldn't possibly create something so engaging and fun on my own, and I think a lot of writers struggle with that. But to see someone my own age trying to do what I'm doing and struggling with things that I've struggled with, it was just, like I said, the right book at the right time. Reading Fangirl really kind of inspired me to start to take my own writing seriously again. I had wanted to really write things for a long time, and I had started a lot of things and stopped. Reading Fangirl really got the writing itch going in me again. I really wanted to tell my own stories. I do struggle with being consistent in my writing schedule, but I'll pick Fangirl up again probably in November for NaNoWriMo, and just reading it always pushes me again to start writing more. It just makes me want to go on the same journey that Kath is going on, which is one of discovering who you are as a person and a writer, and kind of how you can live your life that way. And last but not least, we have A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. This is my newest love. About 2 years ago, a friend of mine suggested our little book group read it, and it was something I liked at the time. And for whatever reason, recently, I had really wanted to start the show. And I went, you know what, let me just reread the book to refresh my memory. And something about this second read really hit my soul the right way, and it is now absolutely one of my favorite novels. It follows Diana Bishop, who is a professor from Yale, who is visiting Oxford to teach alchemy and study alchemy. You know, she's writing dissertations and all that stuff. And she crosses paths with Professor Matthew Claremont, who is a biochemist. I can't remember exactly what he is, because that's not really the point. The point is that she's a witch and he is a vampire, and they're not supposed to even like each other, and yet they fall in love. There's more to it than that. It's a very witchy, dark, academy, foodie fantasy kind of novel. It's absolutely phenomenal. But something that really stuck with me, even from the first read, was I was very interested in the food and the French. After the first read, I did the audiobook for it, and I did the audiobook for my reread. And just hearing the French said, because Matthew's mother Isabeau speaks French and Matthew also speaks French, and just hearing them say things in French or in French accents was just so poetic. It sounded so beautiful, and I got obsessed. So I started learning French on Duolingo, and I've done it for about 500, you know what, let me check. As of today, I will have done it 595 days in a row. So that tells you when I last read the book for the first time, and I read it again a couple months ago in September, and I've been learning French ever since that first time. But this time around, I was just as equally obsessed with the food. I remember the food descriptions being really great, but I couldn't remember what they were, and I listened to it this time, and they were so mouth-wateringly good that I actually even looked up some of the recipes, and I made one already. It wasn't even a recipe that was explicitly named in the book. It was just described what the dish was and where it originated, and I did some Google searching. I went down a rabbit hole until I found this stew that's veal and apple and sage over rice, and it sounds so simple, and it is, but it's delicious. And I've looked up other recipes. I cannot wait to try them. But that is it for this video of 5 books that have helped shape me as a reader and a person. These are glaring evidence that reading really does affect your life in more ways than one. And I'm really grateful for that. I wouldn't be the person I am today without stories. Stories have helped make up who I am as a person, like I said, since I was 6, even younger. I remember my parents trying to read me Dr. Seuss books. I was very particular about which ones were allowed to be read, but that's a whole other story for another day. At any rate, if you enjoyed this video, let me know by leaving a like down below. And what book shaped you? Do you have a list like mine, or is it just one that stands out in your mind as having fundamentally changed you as a person? I'm really curious, so let me know down in the comments below. But for now, I'm going to get going. If you want to keep up with me and all of my bookish adventures, you can go ahead and click the subscribe button. And of course, I highly recommend that you ring the little bell so that you don't miss a beat. It will notify you every time I post a new video, which in the month of October, which is very quickly winding down to an end, will be every single day. So I'll see you guys tomorrow with a new one. Bye!